One of the things I like most about what I do at Vieunite is getting to know a body of work, and through that body of work, getting to know the artist that made it. And with the artist that we're looking at today, an amazing photographer called Anthony Webb, that's a particularly special experience for me, because not only do I have an awful lot of his work, from digital images to 35mm transparencies to the published books, I've also got the sketchbooks that he kept and the scrapbooks that he kept when he was an art student. Anthony, or Ant as the family called him, had a distinctive talent for spotting character and colour in life and then framing it in an inventive and engaging way. And what it is that comes across in his work is an ability to edit reality, by which I mean to capture the world as it really is, but a bit more interesting, a bit more distinctive, a bit more diverse and colourful. So in this video, what I'm going to try to do is to give you a flavour of the personality that I've come to know through the work, the creative man behind the set of images. And normally with videos like this, I would do that by interviewing the artist, and I'd be able to ask them questions directly. And I'm not able to do that with Ant because, tragically, he killed himself in 2019 at the age of 46. So my understanding of him and his work is something that I can't test. I can only look at the work and form judgments on that basis. But with Ant, his vision was so distinctive that I think that it's possible to do that in a way that, quite frankly, wouldn't be with many other artists. One thing's absolutely clear to me. Ant was an artist possessed with a very particular way of seeing the world, one that is warm, quite often funny, and never boring. Born and raised in Hereford, Ant's artistic journey began in his early teens. What I get is a sense of an insatiable curiosity, and this curiosity, I think, is what led him away from the lush landscapes of rural Herefordshire to London via Newcastle. And it was in London that he formed a kind of relationship with the city, which feels like it was his muse. It was something that he celebrates in his work. He studied at Central St Martin's, which is a very prestigious art school in central London, and worked for numerous clients, from The Guardian to Transport for London, Condé Nast Traveller, or Thames and Hudson. We've got some of his Thames and Hudson books here. These professional achievements are a matter of public record. So what I want to focus on more is the artistic personality that I can see in the work, this sense of identity that shines through the work. And I'm going to begin with what might seem like an irrelevant aside. But for the sake of our younger viewers, in the 1980s and 1990s, which is when Ant and I both grew up and came of age, pre-internet, with only 4 channels on terrestrial TV, if you had a visual curiosity, a visual hunger, you had to work quite hard to feed it. You had to stay up late to watch the foreign films on Channel 4. You had to gather artifacts together, like the cuttings you can see in Ant's, scrapbooks. You had to put this material together. You had to work to put the material together to feed yourself. And that's what I get a sense of looking at these scrapbooks which he put together when he was an art student, is this hunger, this insatiable curiosity. And you can see the same thing later on in one of his later bodies of work, East End Fashionistas, which is this incredible selection of images of the characters that made up the city that inspired him so much, particularly the East End of London, where you can see remarkable people wearing remarkable clothes with remarkable inventiveness and being spontaneous and creative in the way that he was too. And I think London must have felt when he first got there like something of an oasis. It's like going from this kind of visual drought of a small town in the late 80s to the sudden abundance of the big city. It's a kind of visual hit that I can remember from my own journey to art school at about the same time. And I get that sense of it looking at his scrapbooks as well.
The project that Anthony has been set starts off with the statement, opposites, extremes and contradiction, and he writes, "The collection of images reflect my own personal development in all aspects of life. The images fall within a wide spectrum, stretching from innocence to sexual extreme, that can only really be appreciated by an esoteric audience. They are demonstrations not so much of my beliefs or behaviour, but more as a way of gaining insight into my own habitat. On a basic level, the images portray sex, drugs and style. These are overlaid with a dramatic sense of fantasy. This attracts you to them and promotes their subject, but in a way that is so stylised and unreal that you feel as though you could only be an observer. This is the function of the majority of my images, as they bear little comparison to my day-to-day life, but instead feed hopes that life is fabulous, and go on to create my idea of heaven." He says here that perfection requires contradictions, and that seems to me to be a statement that is true for, so much of his work. Not just at this stage in his life, but later on. Tom of Finland, possibly a younger RuPaul, looking fabulous. What a diverse range of images. Could that possibly be a young Ant Webb with Keith Chegwin, popular 80s entertainer? Certainly that's Keith Chegwin, it says so on the back, and that really does look like Anthony Webb. I think that these sketchbooks they give a sense. Seeking out grist, and you can see lots of themes in these books that then emerge later on in his photography. There's a real sort of interest in glamour. Lots of pictures of Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, that's Lillian Gish. More Marilyn. The Ecstasy of St. Teresa by Bernini, an extraordinary thing. And what a contrast. There's Arnie. 2 photographs of Elizabeth Taylor and then another one over there, and some more there at the bottom, in different stages of life. And here, what an amazing photograph. Is that Betty Davis? Then some other images of her later on in life, getting older. But there's a sense of an interest in glamour here, isn't there? Glamour and its maintenance, the maintenance of glamour. The work of glamour. Sex. I think that in this page here there's a journey, isn't there, from Hereford Cathedral and the bridge to Gay Pride, Toulouse.
So what I've got on the table in front of me is a collection of the kinds of materials that we work with in order to put together Ant's legacy. Because when he died, he left an abundance of images, but in different forms. So there are loads of these 35mm transparencies associated with different projects, the publications, and then there are some other sources of digital images. So what you can see on the table is kind of where we get the material from to work with to start to construct his legacy. Because what we're doing at Vieunite is not just trying to make Ant's work available to a new audience or a wider audience through our Vieunite art library, we're also preserving it. We're trying to put together a structured and ordered database of images that the family can use on other projects besides. So it's a really big and meaningful job that we're doing that actually involves a lot of people. Not just me, I work with a team of people who are going through Ant's images and identifying where they came from, trying to date them, describing them, adding keywords and tags so that they can be found and so forth. And it's a difficult exercise to do because there are so many of the images to work with, and of course these are just the images that Ant left behind. They're not necessarily images that he would have wanted to have published. So we have to kind of try and second guess his intentions. Now that sounds like a really difficult thing to do, and it is quite difficult, but I think with a lot of other artists it would actually be impossible, whereas with Ant's work I think it is possible because he's got a very clear sense of vision which creates a kind of logic in the photographs that by spending time with them I've been able to understand. So a real feature of Anthony's work is this picture in a picture motif, which you can see here. This is clearly the roof of a Baroque church, and it's framed in this interesting way, as you can see there, with the painted ceiling, the way in which that's framed within the rectangle of the photograph. Totally different example. Young man sitting down reading a newspaper, the standard light, strangely nostalgic image for me. And you've got that box within the box and the kind of real illumination with the sun striking it from the other side. Here's another example. It's typical of Anthony's work in lots of ways. I mean, as I'll come back to, there's an interest in people here quite clearly. You can see the woman and the man sharing a fag outside what's possibly a bar, but they've got, again, you've got that kind of implicit square there, which is actually that unit really, but then it's broken up. There's a kind of collaging going on here. It's a bit like a scrapbook.
in some ways, but because you've got the image is composed of these many pictures within a picture. In a lot of his commercial photography, you see the same thing. So lots of shots of hotel interiors which are reflected in mirrors. This is the inside of a shop. And in San Francisco, this is from the San Francisco book. And there's a picture in a picture up there as well. So you've got the picture in a picture in a picture. That's a Matisse painting. This is obviously a sort of looks like they're selling vintage hats. Here you go, another example, picture in a picture. And again, there are lots of them. Sometimes they tend towards a kind of abstraction, which I think you can start to see here in this photo of the Hotel Majestic. Again, another sort of hint of, maybe voyeurism is not quite the right word. Perhaps it's like a kind of flaneurism, if that's a word. I love this photograph. This has got lots of, there's a DJ up there in this, presumably in some kind of booth that looks like it's maybe reflected. It's quite difficult to read this image. So you've got, like, in some ways, clearly that's a chandelier, that's a woman. She's obviously a DJ, she's got her headphones on, she's got some kind of deck in front of her. But exactly where this is in space is a little bit more ambiguous. And as I said, they tend towards abstraction. I think this is a really interesting image. And increasingly you get this sort of assertion of surface and composition within the surface. There are a lot of photographs where we see reflections, particularly in areas like this financial district of London. But look at this, that is clearly shot through a window, so you get the sort of patterns of the reflection the other side. And so it's like the surface of the photograph is a really strong element in the picture itself. Reflections are quite a common feature of his work as well. And the, flat pattern making opportunities that reflection affords. This is from Birmingham. This is New Street Station. Prague. London. Again, the window this is shot through is like a kind of film over the image. Sydney. And just look at this one. I mean, this is a fantastic photograph. You've got all sorts going on here. Again, you've got that sense of collaging. You've got the assertion of the surface. You've got something I haven't commented on yet, but there's quite a lot of grids here. So you get, a sense of a grid there in the windows and the grid in the ceiling that's picked up. You get the grid here. Implicit grid there. Grid there. Grid. Very strong grid there. These are like compositional devices. There's something that he's leaning on and he's using to organize the image. And in some of them, there's a tension between sort of organization and abstraction, which provides a degree of visual interest to the image. Again, very strong use of the grid here. This is the bar of a theatre, or a theatre bar, or here a photograph of presumably a photograph that's been wrapped in bubble wrap. So you get the same sort of surface, this sort of insertion, sort of mediation of having a film in between you and the image. Really strong in this photograph, which I adore. It's shot through presumably a bus window in London in the rain. People feature a lot in his work. I mean, that's clear in some of the images which we've already seen. And there the interest is slightly different. So we're not looking at abstract or formal or sort of image making qualities as being the main source of interest. It's the people that are in the photograph that matter here. But even in these images, you see the same kinds of devices being used. The picture in a picture which frames this, it doesn't look like an entirely comfortable moment for the man, I don't think. And this is something that we see more of as well. You get this kind of, notice how you got that green there, which stretches down over this lady's clothing, sort of organising these blocks, and you've got that sort of lilac colour there. There's another kind of visual rhyme. So if that's a kind of rhyme which relies on colour, and this is a rhyme that relies on shape. Clearly, I don't need to spell it out. Look, here again, shot through a window, you get that sense of there being a kind of film. So it's capturing the moment. The moment is where the interest is. This tired chef. But you've got the same kind of device. You've got the grid, you've got the reflection, and the human interest. Picture in a picture. So this is something one sees a lot in Anthony's work. This is presumably from the East End Fashionistas series of images. You've got something I've already commented on. You've got that kind of tonal or colour matching, so that the man's clothing and the colour of the window frame. You've also got his upper torso being framed there. You've got a sense of the grid. This is how the image is put together. This is Ant's craftsmanship. Again, you get that kind of, look at that frame. Framed in the doorway. And you get, again, the sort of tonal work across the image as a whole. Same thing here, these very warm colours. This is a different version of the same phenomenon. So we've got, the dark clothing and then these arrow shapes, which kind of, in a different way, frame the image, but it's the same kind of device being used. Look at that, the yellow which stretches up here in this gorgeous photo there and creates a large V shape to that composition, which makes the image hang together. And this is beautiful. I mean, really beautiful. So you've got this sort of slightly kooky looking individual here with the light pink shawl. What a genius thing to do. The light pink, at the same angle. It's wonderful. Red, blue, and there's a kind of interaction between the two faces. This is quite complicated, isn't it? You've got that kind of circular movement in there. Look at that. Colour of the trousers, colour of the dog. And this is what I really enjoy when I'm going through Ant's work. You can see the way in which an image is put together, and the more time you spend with the image, the more you see in it, because they're not simple things. They look like spontaneous images. Look at the spontaneity that's implicit in this lady's face, for instance, or in this lady's face. Right? These are people that are clearly at ease, but there's a lot of intelligence and technical work that goes into making these accidents happen, that by spending time with the images, one can come to appreciate.
So the task before me here is actually quite difficult. It's certainly not something I can rush, because I really need to think carefully, not just about the quality of the individual image, but also about whether it feels like it conforms to my understanding of what might have been in Ant's mind at the time that he was taking the photograph. And in some ways that's an impossible task, but I'm guided by what Ant left behind, and it's, as I've previously intimated, that guide is the sense of his vision. What do I mean by that? Well, you get a sense of it straight away by going through the books that he published. There was Takeaway, which was the first book that he published, together with his creative partner. Then the Style City books, published by Thames and Hudson, and East End Fashionistas. So we can go through those books and we get a sense of the kinds of image that made it into print. And I think that's particularly important with East End Fashionistas, which is the least editorial of those publications. It's the one which feels most like an artistic project. And there is another complication that needs to be acknowledged, as I've already alluded to, which is that not all of these books feature Ant's photography alone. Because in the late 1990s, Ant set up a graphic design consultancy with his friend and colleague Ingrid Rasmussen. And Takeaway, which is the book I've just mentioned, is the book that they worked on together. So there are going to be images in there which are by him, some which are by her, and it's not always that easy to tell which is which. And the same is also true for some of the Style City books. Now look at this photograph here. I love the rhyme, the visual rhyme in that set of images. And it's kind of, collage aesthetic again, which makes its way all the way through Ant's work. And in a close professional relationship, there's going to be a high degree of mutual influence and a sort of merging of authorship. But nevertheless, because I've got access to so many images that Ant took and so much of his work over such a long period, and most importantly because Ant had this compositional flair, an interest in, perhaps even in the kind of self-referential or formal aspects of image making, I think I've got a reasonable way of being able to put his work back into an archive and then pull out not just his work, but work that he may have felt was fit to publish. In other words, I get a sense of his vision, the quality of Ant as an artist that's more than the sum of his individual images.